Welcome back. You are still watching NTV Weekend Edition, and this is Talk of the Nation. Now, on Thursday, the European Union Parliament passed a resolution on violations of human rights in Uganda and Tanzania linked to investments in fossil fuel projects. The resolution called for several actions from EU members, the governments of Uganda and Tanzania, and the oil company Total Energies that, if implemented, could have far-reaching effects on the future of Uganda's oil and gas sector, particularly, and the nation's developed plans in general. Now, with us in studio tonight, we do have Mr. Dennis Kakembo, a lawyer with a lot of experience in Uganda's oil and gas sector. Mr. Kakembo, welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Thank you, Mildred, for hosting me tonight.
Yes, now the European Parliament resolution calls for several things, including halting extractive activities in some areas, as well as considering alternatives to the East African oil pipeline. Now, generally speaking, tell us about, before we get into the details, how has this been received among the players in the sector?
First and foremost, the issue of environmentalists opposing the construction of the East African crude oil pipeline has not been new. There has been a lot of opposition to this project for the longest part of the time when the project was mooted to happen. Of course, some of us had not expected that it would take the direction it has taken of getting a resolution passed by the European Union. I think that is the surprising bit. But it's not surprising because in any case, some of the issues which have been cited in the resolution by the European Union Parliament are the same issues that the civil society organizations opposed to the project have been raising. Of course, some of these issues have been blown out of proportion. Some of them are clear distortions, and others are a contradiction of what we see happening in the other parts of the world. Of course, before a project of this magnitude happens, you need to carry out what they call an environmental social impact assessment. And the rationale for carrying out this environmental social impact assessment is for you to find out what the costs for the project are going to be vis-a-vis the benefits. And once you identify what the costs are, you need to come up with mitigation measures to ensure that the project does not cause harm to the people. So some of the issues which the civil society have been raising for the longest time, some have related to the compensation of the project affected persons. And they've been urging government to ensure that before the project takes off, all project affected persons are adequately and fairly compensated. The other
Have we seen this happening?
I think for the greater part of the time, government has been identifying who the project affected persons are, and as far as I'm concerned, it's in advanced stages together with other players and the oil companies of making sure that the individuals are compensated. Therefore, for the European Union Parliament to entirely rely on a speculative fear that the project affected persons are not going to be compensated and pass that resolution is rather disheartening.
Okay, what are the reflections of Uganda when you talk about this resolution?
Now, first and foremost, we need to appreciate the geopolitical environment under which this resolution has come to be made. In 1962, there is Resolution 1803, which was passed by the UN General Assembly. And this resolution gave countries the permanent sovereignty over their natural resources. What this resolution meant was that as independent sovereign countries, all countries of the world had a right to explore their natural resources in the way they wished as a means of fostering their own economic development. A few years back, European countries have taken a decision to scale back on the exploration of natural resources. They've recently, in light of the struggles and they've had with Russia, they have now revived extraction or exploration of natural resources as a means of buffering their oil and gas resources. They are doing this in line with the UN Resolution 1803 of 1962 that gives them the right to extract and explore their natural resources as they so wish. When UK recently decided that they're going to give new licenses, when Norway is currently running a licensing round, when Germany is currently reviving coal-powered stations, I have not seen any country in the world, Uganda inclusive or Kenya, rise up and have an issue with Germany
with them
doing that. So similarly, Uganda and Tanzania are sovereign countries in line with their sovereign right, which has been given to them by the UN General Assembly. They've decided to explore their oil and gas by building a crude oil pipeline as a means of enhancing the livelihoods of their own people. So it's quite surprising that another player is coming out to interfere and have issues and concerns around how this project is going to be run. Of course, what I would say, it is right to highlight issues of human rights violations which could go wrong. It is right to point out costs that government has got to take care of, but it is not fair for you to impose your will for Uganda not to develop its crude oil project on the basis of speculative fears, distortions. Like today morning, I saw a map which was shared by one of the parliamentarians in the EU that supported that resolution. And this map shows that almost 90% of Uganda and Kenya are covered, and Tanzania are covered by rivers. And their argument was that if you allow the EACOP project to go on, all these rivers are going to be polluted, which is not true, which is distorted. And therefore, if that is the basis for the European Union Parliament to sanction and urge all the players to stop moving ahead with the project, it's disheartening.
So picking from your thoughts, it seems you're not in agreement for Uganda to actually heed to the European Union resolution, right?
Yes.
Okay, so in your view, does this appear like the EU is suppressing Uganda from, development or economic growth in terms of extracting oil and oil production?
I wouldn't answer the question directly.
Why?
But what I would say is that there are contradictions. Of course, the oil and gas industry has contributed to pollution of the environment and global gases emissions, and there are several steps which are being taken by the entire world to reduce this eradication. The unfortunate reality and truth is that the oil and gas industry, in as much as we would wish to get away with it as soon as we can, there's no viable alternative at this point in time for us to entirely wean ourselves off the oil and gas industry.
Okay.
So we still have to stay within. And more to that, when you look at some of the economic activities that pollute the world more, the global gas emissions, most of these activities are incidentally being carried out in Europe. When you look at air transport, when you look at the carbon print of the ships, a lot of the activities take place in Europe. Now, when you look place at Uganda and other African countries, our biggest challenge is energy poverty. We use biomass. I think 90% of the population here uses charcoal and wood fuel for purposes of cooking. And you can imagine the smoke that goes out. Now, and then the pollution to the environment as a result of that. Now, with the EACOP project, if Uganda's oil and gas project takes off, we are going to produce LPG, significant portions of LPG. So if you have LPG, it means that the cost of access to gas is going to be much cheaper. And if you create an alternative for people to use gas as opposed to wood, you're actually helping manage the pollution and global gases emissions. Therefore, if the European Parliament, if the environmentalists are keenly interested in seeing that Uganda and other African countries play a role in the reduction of global gas emissions, they have to support some of our projects because we have energy poverty here, the low levels of economic activity, and there's so much dependence on biomass. If you allow the extraction of the crude oil, stimulate economic development, and give us more access to energy, you're actually reducing our adverse impact to the environment.
Well, Mr. Kakembo, in this very resolution, there were specific calls for Total Energies, a major investor in the oil pipeline project, to take a year, to evaluate its involvement, in this project. So what impact would this have on the existing timelines, and agreements that have already been entered into by the governments, the different governments?
First and foremost, drawing back a little to the UN Resolution 1803 of 1962, it's not CNOOC, China National Offshore Oil Company, or Total that are the owners of the project in Uganda. Uganda's oil and gas belongs to the people of Uganda. being held in trust by the government of Uganda. So the project for Uganda's oil and gas is being manned and overseen by the government of Uganda. Total and CNOOC are contractors. They are like servants. The government of Uganda has asked them, please come, develop this resource that I am holding on behalf of the people of Uganda. Now, Total and the China National Offshore Company have a commercial undertaking. They have a contractual obligation with the government of Uganda to commit to do what they've got to do. The resolution by the European Union, I'm not an expert on European law, but my feeling is that it's advisory as opposed to being binding. Because at the end of it all, if any of these companies hit to that, that means there's a breach of contractual obligation, which could actually give Uganda a right to adjudication, take them on in international arbitration or even courts of law for breach of obligations. But even more to that, the final investment decision for Uganda's oil project and the EACOP project has already been taken. Final investment decision means an irreversible commitment to move ahead with the project. By the time you get to a point of a final investment decision, it means that the shareholders have given all the sanctions, and you've also signed major contracts with all the players. As we know very well here, the major EPC contractors have already mobilized. McDermott is in the country, Sinopec is in the country, COSIL, all the players, they are ramping up. So I just don't know the amount of commercial loss that CNOOC or Total would suffer if they were to ever call off this project, because you're going to be sued left, right, and center by all these contractors who have already come, with whom you've already entered into an agreement, and more to that, on the basis of an advisory resolution. Because by Uganda extracting its crude oil, it has not committed any crime. It has not violated any international rules and norms. Okay. And therefore, you cannot say that's an act of God or a force majeure action that is out of your control. So we wait to see what will happen. But from where I stand, of course, the EU resolution has political pressure, but I don't think it might derail the project. Of course, we also have to take some reflection. Maybe some of the issues they are raising, we need to look into them to ensure that indeed their fears do not come to pass. But at this point in time, it is unfair for the EU Parliament, on the basis of speculative reasons, to urge Uganda's oil and gas project to stop. And more to that, it's also contradictory on the basis that you're stopping oil and gas extraction in Africa, but you yourself, in Europe, you're ramping up oil and gas exploration activities.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis Kakembo, for sharing, and it's been a pleasure having you. We now take a break and return with news from the world of sport.